and there's going to be a number of recommendations. And from those recommendations, they're going to require some legislation. One of the things we've had a lot of discussion about is the availability of clinics throughout Maryland. One of the key areas that we're concerned about is making sure that every clinic is 30 minutes from anybody in the state. And that's not true right now. We've got some rural parts of Maryland where some people have to drive 2 hours to get to a clinic. And guess what? They're not going to drive. They're just going to stay home and not get the treatment that they need. So that's one of the many points that we're going to be fleshing out here. Our report is, we're working on the final edits of the report, and I hope to have it ready for the Veterans Commission meeting upcoming here for Prince George's County, so that we can all kind of help implement these areas that I think are really important to veterans.
There was another study, I believe, that was done about a separate veterans court.
Yes.
For veterans that come before, have some legal problems and come before the court.
Right. I put that bill in last year. Judge Devlin came down and testified on the bill. We had 3 different areas we were going to have pilot programs in: north, central, and south, parts of the state, so that it would be accessible to all veterans. The chairman of the circuit court came out and was not supportive of the bill.
He was opposed. No, but the former judge of Missouri, no question, recently retired. Not because, no connection with that, but he was very forceful in his opposition. And, it's been done in Erie County, New York, and Buffalo. They've had it, and it seems to have opposition throughout the judiciary. It's a tough one to get through because there are several courts now, these so-called special courts,
Right.
And then it's like, good God, here they come again, kind of, but I think there's an education thing on that one. I think that's clearly, I think, a summer study type issue, and a lot of research has to be done to make the case.
So that'll probably be something that'll be studied again next year, or are we going to get a report out? Or
Well, what I did was I went recently to the Judicial Ride-Along program in the courts, and I met with the new administrative judge, Judge Adams. And I talked to her about it specifically. I said, look, I don't want to introduce this and have a confrontation between myself and you, particularly with a key veterans issue like this. And she was very receptive, and she said, we may not need a specialty court, but I have some ideas of how we could help implement this. And I said, all I really care about and the veterans care about is making sure that, when they get in trouble, that there's somebody there who's had combat experience or understands that they've been through something a lot different than just, a person who just committed a crime and has never served. Because I think we can all agree that there's a lot that goes on in combat, and then you have to come back and become part of society. It's just different. We need somebody there who can really shed some light on it.
Yeah, that where you might be well advised to speak to a constituent. Judge Patty Lewis lives in the 23rd District,
right.
And she runs the mental health court in the Prince George's County District Court. And if you could convince her, because she's very open-minded and intelligent, and listen to reason, but right off the top, right off the top of her head, she's in the negative category. But she's persuadable and intelligent, and she can be, and knows the courts like few people know it.
There's one big issue. Charlotte Hall is almost full now. We're going to need another veterans home, pretty much more centrally located. Now, we have the pilot program. Of course, Charlotte Hall is one of the premier veterans homes in the country. A lot of states that don't have one come to Maryland, go down there, and see how they can really get started, because it's such a fantastic setup between the state and the Veterans Administration. Is there any move, or how are we going to stand? Because first of all, Maryland will have to put up 1/3 of the seed money like we did for Charlotte Hall. And then they'll have to come up with 1/3 of the construction money. Now for phase 4, it was like about $170,000 for the design, and then they had to come up with $3.1 million for the construction. And of course, it was approved. Louis Goldstein was very instrumental in helping us get that done. This was in the '94 to '96 time frame. I was legislative chairman for the DAV, and then commander of in that time. So we were very fortunate to get that through. So is there, what does it look like for getting another veterans home in Maryland?
Well, I think, we'd really have to look at the entire state and see where it would have to be located. Clearly, we're going to need some participation from the federal government, hopefully the county, if it's located in that county. There's nothing right now that's been, planned out, but my guess is that we'd really have to put some people together and do some study and try to find out where it would be best positioned. Because, Charlotte Hall is a success story, but a lot of people think it's kind of too far away.
Well, there's no one from Western Maryland in Charlotte Hall.
Right.
It's mostly, I would say, either Southern Maryland and predominantly
Central
Prince
Maryland.
George's County,
Right.
Central
and there's some from Baltimore, but no one west of Frederick, and because it's just too far.
Right.
Well, from Bowie, it's a 45-minute ride,
Right.
one way, and now we have Fort Detrick in Frederick, that's federal. We have Fort Meade here in Anne Arundel County, that's federal. We have Aberdeen, that's federal. That's really large bases that would be very. The ground should be free. I mean, all we have to do is build. So, I mean, this is something that we should. And I don't know about Fort Howard. Fort Howard seems to be falling apart from what we heard last night. Fort Howard would even be good. And I don't know about Perry Point, but as I say, you're not going to get anything in downtown Baltimore. I mean, that's a given. You know what I'm saying? We already have the VA right there. But we're going to need some place that has a sprawling land like they do there in Charlotte Hall.
Charlotte Hall was a military school for many, many years before.
Right.
The
In fact,
state
the chapel that was built in the late 1800s is still being used. So.
Well, I think you're making a good case to get together and kind of reach a consensus on where it would be located, which would serve the most veterans. And, we take direction well, the legislature, from the veterans. So I think it doesn't matter who initiates it, whether it's the commission or, some of the local veterans groups, but I think we need to look at a regional picture here when we do this, if it's the second one that we want, and it's got to serve the people who aren't coming, to Charlotte Hall.
Right. Well, one thing is Prince George's County has the largest veterans base in the state. And then Montgomery County has a large base, Anne Arundel County has a large base, and so does Baltimore City and Baltimore County. So in this particular area would be the most beneficial place. I mean, you don't want to build something way out in Western Maryland when you really don't have a lot of veterans out there. Of course, they could use maybe a smaller facility out there. But that was a 504-bed facility at Charlotte Hall, and then they needed to take away about 50 beds or a wing in order to make more optical, more admin space, because it's got so big, and of course with the computerized system and everything, they just had to upgrade. So I think it's a 460 some bed facility now, 468 I think, and they're almost full. They are almost full now.
So this would be something that would be initiated and submitted through the Veterans Caucus as an idea for a study and that sort of thing, and the best way to handle it may be coming out of the Joint Veterans Commission.
I think that would be the right
And
way
the
to
Veterans
go.
and the Maryland Veterans Commission between
Right.
the two.
I mean,
Yeah.
if we can get a consensus,
Yeah.
I think it
Well, it would
moves
need
forward quickly.
Obviously, it would need a study,
Right.
and within the caucus, there's enough representation from throughout the state, I would expect, that everybody would have a voice in identifying what their particular needs are. Recently, we had a lady down from the Baltimore VA, and she was talking about the same thing, about having regional clinics so that no veteran has to drive more than 30 minutes, and that's what their goal was. And they're building a clinic right on Fort Meade.
Okay.
And for access for veterans to get there too. Are there other studies going on right now that reports ought to be coming out as far as veterans legislation is concerned, or something you think is pretty much imminent as far as the next legislature comes around?
I think that's the big study that is coming out. I mean, we've met for a number of years on this study, and we actually rolled a task force that I chaired when I first got into the Senate. We rolled the recommendations of that group into this study. So this is going to be the comprehensive one. It's mainly focused on post-traumatic stress disorder and how we can help solve that. And I think Judge Devlin touched on an interesting issue. You know, we're always meeting with Department of Mental Health. It's almost like the Department of Veterans Affairs and Department of Mental Health, you know, they work a lot together on these issues because we've got soldiers coming back that have really a lot of mental health issues. And so whatever we do in terms of implementing some legislation, those two groups are going to be factored in heavily, whether it's a second Charlotte Hall or you know, more clinics. You know, where are we getting a lot of these cases, and what are the issues there, and you know, how can we help get these veterans back into you know, working environment?
And I believe there was some discussion too about homeless veterans.
Right.
And some facilities that may come available even in Prince George's County. I don't know if there's any discussion about that.
There's always a debate of, you know, are we going to build something that can house everybody? Or are we going to build something specifically for veterans? And if we do, are there going to be enough veterans that would fill those beds versus the whole of Prince George's County or wherever the homeless shelter's built? That is always brought to the forefront by, you know, different groups to say, you know, we really need to look at this thing holistically rather than just specific groups. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that it's brought up in terms of, you know, it's state money, and we want to try to help everybody who's homeless, not just specific people, you know. So, I mean, I think that I haven't heard any proposals for a homeless shelter, but, you know, I'm sure if it comes down to it, there's going to be a discussion about how many veterans versus the whole homeless shelter picture. You know, how are we going to reconcile that?
I'd like to see them get a McVet here in Prince George's County, like they have in Baltimore.
Well, you'd have to have somebody that would be willing to lead that,
Right.
like Colonel Williams
Right.
does up in Baltimore.
And that's a state, that's totally a state-run thing.
And that's an excellent,
And VA. No,
excellent
VA
program.
does put some money in it, but it's fantastic. I mean, you were talking, I think they have a 200 capacity. I think there's several women up there, and they have stages, and it's pushing 20 years now.
And I guess the other issue too, when it comes to health issues, we have more and more women veterans.
Right.
And so that's always a case. Well, it's hard to believe, but we're out of time again. And we want to thank Senator Peters for coming, and I'm sure he'd like to hear from you. So, you know, send your emails to him, and he'd be more than happy to respond. And we ask you to get involved with your other veterans here in Bowie. Stop by the DAV, stop by the American Legion, and meet your comrades. You served your country. It's time to understand your benefits that you deserve. So we ask you to come by, get involved, and meet with us and learn more about the benefits available to you and your family. Again, thanks for all of us for watching Veterans Forum. Thank Tom, our director.